What's up guys, Mickle here, and in this video, I want to cover a pretty controversial topic, and that is whether or not it actually matters if Ripple loses the current case to the SEC. This is something I really haven't talked about much on this channel, but I have some pretty interesting thoughts on this that I think might shock a lot of you. Towards the end of the video, I also want to talk about a brand new vertical that Ripple is currently getting into that could be absolutely massive. This is something that almost no one is talking about right now, but is a multi-trillion-dollar industry that is going to be absolutely huge for XRP's price if Ripple could succeed here. Make sure to stick around to the end of the video to see that. You are not going to want to miss it. Like always, your support means so much to this channel. If you enjoy these videos, make sure to take a quick second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It's really going to help me out so much. Also, if you ever need a good place to buy some XRP or the Flare token, make sure to check out my favorite exchange Uphold down in the description of this video. With that said though, let's jump right into it, and I hope you guys enjoy the content. So I want to start this video off and quickly cover probably a pretty controversial topic, and that is whether or not it matters if Ripple loses the current case against the SEC. So when I first saw this article, and John Deaton actually responded to this and said the headline was actually misleading because I think it was kind of putting words in his mouth, but I just saw the headline and thought, wow, that's actually a pretty interesting concept. Will Ripple losing to the SEC actually have an impact on XRP holders? So when I initially saw this, I was obviously like, yeah, of course it would. Why would it not? But then I started thinking, and I think there's some context we have to put behind this to really make it make more sense. So first of all, obviously, if Ripple does lose to the SEC, obviously that probably wouldn't be very good for XRP's price, and there would probably be a lot of panic in the market. We also know that it would create more ambiguity around XRP, but at the end of the day, it would really only be ambiguity in the United States where there's already ambiguity. Most of the institutional investors who held XRP in the United States have already been forced to sell, so I don't know how much would really change from an institutional standpoint. Now, you might see a scenario where other countries around the world who work with the SEC in the United States might say, okay, well, if the United States sees XRP as a security, so do we, but that wouldn't necessarily mean they couldn't trade XRP. We know in the United States right now, they're trying to call XRP a security to try to kill liquidity and hurt the project, but that might not necessarily be true in other places around the world. Now, with that said, I think one thing that we really need to take into account here is how long that ruling would really be in effect. John Deaton has stated multiple times, and he's said this publicly, that if Ripple loses this current case to the SEC, they will appeal the decision instantly. Now, this is where things get really interesting because on every single appeal, I personally think, and a lot of lawyers who have followed this case think, that Ripple's chances get better and better. Assuming Ripple does lose this current case, and like you guys know, I do not think Ripple's going to lose the current case, but I think this is an interesting topic to talk about. If Ripple does lose the current case, they will appeal to the Second Circuit. Now, what's so interesting about this circuit is what Ripple will be able to do is raise new arguments. One of the arguments they'll be able to raise is actually the major questions doctrine. Now, this is actually something Coinbase is testing out right now. So what Ripple will actually get to do is see whether or not Coinbase using the major questions doctrine worked or not. That way, if it works and Coinbase actually wins their case against the SEC, Ripple can easily add this to their case and have an extremely strong argument. I'll quickly jump into why this is such a strong argument, but I don't want to go into too much detail here. It's essentially a ruling that just came down that says a regulator cannot interpret the law at their own will when it comes to things of economic or political significance. Well, right off the bat, we know that the cryptocurrency industry has great economic significance. I mean, it's literally going to be the new financial system. Now, what is happening right now, which is so fascinating, is the SEC is 100% trying to interpret the law how they see it, rather than how Congress intended the law to be applied. We have seen even in the Hinman documents, and this is one of the reasons the Hinman documents were so important, that the SEC was literally fighting with each other about the SEC not strictly adhering to the law. One of the drafters of the Hinman speech literally said, hey, we shouldn't talk about the asset itself being the security. That's not how the law works. So what we have is the SEC purposely misinterpreting the law, literally pushing conspiracy theories about the assets itself being a security, and meanwhile we have the major questions doctrine specifically stating they are not allowed to do that. The only thing the SEC could do to try to push back against this idea is try to justify that they do have power to regulate this industry. But one thing that is so shocking is Gary Gensler himself, and Coinbase brought this up in their case, literally said the SEC does not have the power as of now to regulate the cryptocurrency industry. So we have the head of the SEC literally coming out and saying, hey, we don't have authority over this industry. The SEC then going and pursuing litigation on the industry, and the major questions doctrine, which was just ruled on by the Supreme Court, so it's above all other decisions, just came out and stated that the SEC is not allowed to interpret the law as they wish simply to attack this industry. So I think this is a very, very powerful argument, and if Coinbase does succeed for it, well, Ripple's going to have a layup of an extremely strong argument that they could add to their case. The other thing we know is that even if Ripple was to lose to the Second Circuit, which for the reasons I just described, I don't think is going to happen, but even if Ripple was to lose to that circuit, they could then go to the Supreme Court, where I just think Ripple's chances of beating the SEC would be 100%. Right now, the Supreme Court is heavily focused on pushing back against the government. Now, whether or not you like their past decisions or not, I don't talk about those on this channel, it is extremely beneficial for Ripple in the position they are in right now. Ripple right now needs a Supreme Court or a court that's not simply going to side with the government because they're the government. And right now we are actually in a very unique time in history where we're actually seeing the Supreme Court really pushing back against the government. So if Ripple was to go to the Supreme Court, and John Deaton has already commented on this, he doesn't think there is any chance ever that XRP would be called a security. So where am I trying to go with this? Well, what I'm really trying to say is that even if Ripple was to lose the current case to the SEC, they get 2 more chances of winning. Ripple is in the perfect position to beat the SEC. It just might take longer than many people want. Now, the good news is I don't think it's going to take that long, because I think Ripple's going to win in the current case. But I think it's so important to understand that even if Ripple was to lose the current case, they still have so many chances to beat the SEC, and their chances are actually just getting better and better. And that's why the SEC is in such a bad position. Not only are they doing an atrocious job in the current case, but they're not in a position to appeal anything either. The higher they let this case go up the ladder to the Second Circuit and then the Supreme Court, the more they're hurting their agency, because every single ruling of a higher level court hurts the SEC even more because the ruling becomes more powerful. One of the most dangerous things for the SEC going forward would be if they let this case get to the Supreme Court and we got a new, more specific Howey test that really put the clamps on the SEC. I have a feeling this has to be something they're terrified of, and that's why I am so optimistic in the position Ripple is right now. So now I want to move on and talk about a brand new industry that it looks like Ripple is getting into, and this is very exciting, and I am in full support of this decision. Ripple Labs to tokenize the multi-billion-dollar real estate industry. Now, this is already something we've seen Ripple getting into, specifically in Hong Kong, but this is very exciting because 1, this industry is absolutely monstrous, and 2, it is ripe for disruption. I have really not seen any cryptocurrency projects really making big headway in tokenizing the cryptocurrency industry. So first of all, it's important to understand that this industry is wide open and huge. There's going to be multiple winners, but Ripple is already positioning themselves perfectly to be a winner because of their CBDC platforms. Real estate is heavily intertwined with both the government and the financial system, so it makes perfect sense for Ripple to be working on this alongside CBDCs. Now, what Ripple will eventually be able to do is actually start tokenizing a lot of this real estate and putting it on a blockchain. And if you ever bought a house or dealt with any kind of real estate transaction, you would understand how painful the process is of doing any kind of real estate transaction. There is so many broken parts of the system. It is so messed up. You are paying fees on everything. You're paying fees to have money sitting in an account for a certain amount of time before a transfer goes through. You're paying fees on all these documents going forward. You're paying fees on this money going back and forth from escrow account to escrow account. It is a massive mess that absolutely needs to be disrupted. Now, without getting into too much detail, it's really important to understand that the real reason the system is so broken is because it's outdated and you have a ton of middlemen. The rails for moving properties, the rails for real estate transactions are antiquated, old, and broken. What Ripple is doing is presenting a new solution that is literally a space age form of transacting in the real estate market, and it's going to cut out all the middlemen. This is going to drastically decrease the amount of time it takes to move ownership of real estate and also dramatically decrease the cost because you're taking out 5 to 10 middlemen who would normally sit in the middle and collect money from the transaction, but also take up time, essentially giving you a reason to pay them to do something. They're essentially just inserting themselves into the process when we have technology today that would make them obsolete. Overall, I am extremely excited with what Ripple's doing here. One, because like I said earlier, it's a massive market. Ripple will definitely be able to carve out their own path. But two, Ripple's already working with the governments, and this industry is going to require a lot of government compliance. This is not an industry that some small players are just going to be able to walk into and disrupt. You are going to have a lot of meetings with regulators, and there is a lot of fine tuning that's going to have to be done on the government side. We know Ripple has been working with governments since day one, and they're literally building entire new financial systems and new forms of money for these governments. Ripple is going to be in the perfect position to start working with the underdeveloped nations in the world to recreate their real estate markets on the XRP ledger. And once the bigger countries realize the efficiency that Ripple is able to drive in these markets, you will see Ripple start to move into bigger markets and tokenizing their real estate markets as well. Guys, when we have trillions of dollars of value in the real estate market flowing onto the XRP ledger, I don't think I need to describe to you what that would do for XRP's price. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for coming. I hope you enjoyed this update. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe. It really does mean so much. And for now, Mickle out.